Greetings, all, and welcome to another episode of Tales of Woe. I will be your humble storyteller, Tim, and today I would like to share with you the story of the beginning of my first ever Dungeons and Dragons campaign, also interestingly known as The Beginning. Original name, I know. This campaign ran for almost 2 years and had a little bit of a rocky start, as you might imagine. My players were. Some of them were new, some of them were not, but I was very much a brand new dungeon master. I'd never played Dungeons and Dragons before, but I had seen other online streams and I had read some of the source books and come up with my own sort of ideas and basically took a whole bunch of ideas, threw them into a blender, hit the puree button, and just decided to see what would spit out. Essentially, the beginning of the campaign involved three party members, soon to become four party members. There was Brune, the dwarven cleric. There was Eris, the sorceress elven wild mage. And then there was Wallflower, a tiefling druid. They had made their way to the city of Waterdeep in search of a scribe who had written a book. Basically, the hook was that Eris was in charge of a library in another town, and someone had come to that town and destroyed a specific book of lore. And in order to find out what was actually in that book, they decided to attempt to track down the person who was responsible for writing it in the first place. Making their way to Waterdeep, they made their way through the town and came across this scribe's home. While there, they managed to find what it was they were looking for, but unfortunately, there was a bit of an argument happening outside. Basically, there was another group of people that were looking for this information as well, and when they came to the store and were talking about it, there was a huge fight that was beginning to start outside between some guards and some of the townsfolk. Brune, being the muscle and voice of reason of the group, you could say, decided to go on outside and see what was going on, and promptly had himself thrown straight through the window back into the building, knocking a pot plant off the wall, which turned out to be a polymorphed member of the party, Nuru, the human noblewoman who was also a thief. The pot plant landing on the ground shattered, exploded. The explosion blew out all of the windows in the place and killed the sage. The people fighting outside decided to make a run for it, and the guards, wanting to know what the heck had happened, decided to burst their way into the building. Unfortunately, being a small building that it was, there were windows and other accesses out, but it was contained. There was a way out through the wall in the back room into a back alley. So they all sprinted into the back. They barricaded the room and decided to basically hack their way through the wall, which they did with relative ease. And at that point, the guards burst into the back room. Our trusty druid casting a web spell in order to tie them up, and they were restrained. There was no real problems there. They were able to make their escape. But Nuru had a different idea, and she decided to use her burning hands, and she set the webs on fire, set the building on fire, and the guards all burnt to death, or so they thought. And at this point, they decided, right, we better get the heck out of here. They had managed to claim the book. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. So they had the book. They had what they came for, but they were now wanted by the law. So they sprinted out of the city through the gates of Waterdeep and into the woods on the outskirts of town. They made camp for the night, and as they were camping, they were surrounded by mists. And when they awoke the next morning, they had emerged in Ravenloft. And that was where the story began. That was basically the end of the first session, which, thinking back on it, was a pretty unique way, at least for me. I'm not sure about other dungeon masters, but, getting into trouble, setting fire to a building, accidentally murdering the person you came to see, as well as setting fire to some guards. Yeah, it's pretty well par for the course for this group. So yeah, I'll continue with the tales of this group. Unfortunately, they never actually made a name for themselves, which was always a little bit frustrating. So I just started to referring them as the Nuru Crew or the Wallflowers Wagon of Wonders, as the Facebook chat group became known as. But yeah, it was a pretty interesting campaign. Ran for nearly 2 years. Going to the very highs and the very lows, and even at some point having to deal with this thing. So, stay tuned for the next tale of woe.